The land of the silent and the secret of the abandoned well. In a quiet village named Dar al-Salam, where wheat fields intertwined with fresh water canals, a story began that was never anticipated, a story that turned the village's tranquility into whispers of fear and terror. On a Friday morning, after the villagers had performed their dawn prayers, a sharp scream echoed from the house of Hajj Abdul Rahman, the kindest man in the village. They had found his youngest daughter, Farah, 10 years old, lying in her bed. She was smiling a peaceful smile, but she was no longer breathing. The village was shocked, and everyone wept. The doctor said it was a sudden cardiac arrest, a rare but possible occurrence. But, the next day, while Hajj Abdul Rahman was receiving condolences for his daughter, he too fell to the ground, and his soul departed in the arms of the mourners. Before the village could absorb the second shock, the greatest catastrophe occurred on the third day. The twin brother and sister, Hassan and Hasna, were found together in their room, both having passed away in the same mysterious manner. So, was it a fatal coincidence or an ancient curse that had awakened? And what is the secret lurking behind the walls of this afflicted house? Stay with us to uncover a truth that was stranger and more painful than fiction. The house of Hajj Abdul Rahman became a cursed place. The police entered, and the coroners examined everything. There was no trace of poison, no signs of violence, and no criminal suspicion. The family was beloved and had no enemies. The mother, Fatima, suffered a nervous breakdown and was taken to the hospital. And on the fifth day, the last daughter, Huda, followed her siblings. The house was sealed with red tape, and the villagers began to avoid even passing through the street where it was located. There was only one young man in the village who did not accept the idea of fate. His name was Yasin, an agricultural engineer who had recently returned to work on his ancestral land. Yasin believed in science and logic, and he knew that nothing happens without a reason. Yasin sneaked into the sealed house at night, risking his freedom. He searched every corner. He checked the food, the water, the furniture. He found nothing unusual. And just as he was about to despair, he noticed that a tile in the backyard patio seemed different from the rest. With great effort, he lifted the tile and found an opening leading to an old, dry well that everyone had forgotten about. Yasin tied a rope and descended into the dark well. The air was heavy and had a strange smell. And at the bottom, he found something he never expected. There was no water, but the bottom was covered with a thick layer of a ghostly, translucent fungus, its veins pulsing with a cold white light like that of a sick moon. As he was examining the strange fungus, he heard a movement above him. He looked up and was shocked by what he saw. A man in his 40s, strongly built, wearing worn-out clothes, was standing at the edge of the well, looking down at him with eyes full of madness and pain. The man said in a raspy voice, "You found my secret, you curious fool." Then, with a swift motion, he cut the rope. Yasin fell to the ground, now a prisoner at the bottom of the well. The man shouted from above, "This fungus only releases its spores in the dead of night. A fine dust, invisible to the eye and undetectable by any doctor, seeps slowly from the cracks of the well and settles in the lungs of the sleepers, quietly stopping their hearts without a trace. I have waited 5 years to see the family of Abdul Rahman perish one by one, just as my family perished." Yasin listened in horror. The man continued his thunderous confession, 5 years ago, I had land next to Abdul Rahman's. In a year of drought, he dug a well on his land, but he dug deeper than he should have, stealing all the groundwater from my land. My land dried up, and my wife and children perished from hunger and despair. I went to him, begging him to share the water, but he turned me away. He built his life on the ruins of mine. So, I traveled for months, following forgotten maps, until I reached the Gate of Fallen Stars, a place where it is said the other world touches ours. There, I faced 3 Gennias guarding the gate. The first, the Gennia of Memories, forced me to relive the moment of my family's passing 1,000 times. She wanted to break me with pain, but my pain became the fuel for my hatred. The second, the Gennia of Sacrifice, asked me to sacrifice my happiest memory with my family to pass. Without hesitation, I erased the sound of their laughter from my mind, because my revenge had become more precious than any memory. As for the third, the Gennia of Choice, she offered me 2 gardens, one where the flower of life grew, granting fertility and wealth, and the other where the flower of quiet demise grew. I chose my path myself. I returned from there carrying this demonic fungus, and I planted it in his old well. This is justice. Then the man closed the well's opening with a heavy tile, leaving Yasin to perish in the darkness with the deadly fungus. Yasin knew he had only a few hours before the poisonous spores claimed him. But he did not give up. As an agricultural engineer, he knew something about fungi. He knew they hated alkalinity. He searched in the dark until he found what he was looking for, remnants of the old lime plaster used to coat the well's walls. He began to scrape the lime and sprinkle it over the glowing fungus. The fungus began to writhe and hiss loudly as if it were burning, and its glow began to fade. Yasin had stopped its growth, but he was still a prisoner. And at the moment despair almost overtook him, he heard footsteps above. It was Fatima, the bereaved mother, who had escaped from the hospital and returned to her house for one last look. She heard Yasin's faint voice, and with the help of the neighbors, he was rescued. As soon as Yasin was out of the well, weak and struggling to breathe, he shouted at them, "There's no time. The killer is still free." He told the villagers the whole story, and the enraged men, along with the police, set off in pursuit of the vengeful man. The man saw the torches approaching his old hut and ran with all his might, not towards the roads, but towards the rugged mountains he knew so well. A frantic nighttime chase began on the mountain slopes. The man leaped between the rocks like a wild goat, the strength of his hatred making him faster and stronger. Yasin and some brave young men followed him, the warning shots from the police echoing in the air. Finally, they cornered him on the edge of a deep cliff. The man stood there, panting, his eyes gleaming with madness under the moonlight. He shouted, "You will not take me. I will not return to a world that gave me no justice." And instead of surrendering, he turned and threw himself into the dark abyss, choosing his own end, and burying his hatred with him at the bottom of the cliff forever. And here, we reach the hub of the story and its wisdom. Hatred is a bottomless well, and revenge is a weapon that consumes its wielder before its enemy. Injustice does not justify another injustice, and small actions can grow to become either a curse or a blessing. If you were in the man's place and suffered the same injustice, would you have chosen the flower of life or the flower of demise? Share your thoughts in the comments. We want to thank you, our dear followers, for joining us on this journey. Don't forget to subscribe to The Alchemist's Tales to discover a new depth in our next tale.